My name is Josué Rivas, everybody. I'm going to be presenting the power of telling your own story today. And before I begin, I would like to acknowledge that I am on Chinook territory, also known as Portland. And I would like to thank and ask for permission from all the ancestors here and all the people that have lived here before that are still living here, that are part of these homelands, for presenting this project today and presenting it in a good way. Um, this particular story of this project of Standing Strong project um, began as a, I think, out of destiny, to be honest. Now that I think about it, looking back in retrospect, Standing Rock was the beginning of a lot of awakenings. And for me personally, it was an opportunity to see beyond a lot of these systems that were built already in the photo industry, in the storytelling industries, and kind of evolve it and indigenize it in a way, bring that indigenous touch to it. So I would like to start with this quote because when I was a Standing Rock, when I lived there for 7 months during the Code Access Pipeline opposition, John Trudell, who is an Asante Dakota artist, poet, activist, he kept me through this whole thing. He was his recordings and his songs and talks really and books were the things that kept me going through it. So let me just share this with you really quick. I'm just a human being trying to make it in a world that is very rapidly losing its understanding of being human. Every human being is a raindrop, and when enough of the raindrops become clear and coherent, then they become the power of the storm. And I remember hearing this quote and thinking about coherency and thinking about how, as storytellers, we have this responsibility to preserve the spirit of the image. And I had a hard time understanding how I was going to do that because I had never done it consciously before. So during Standing Rock, a lot of the focus was on the conflict, which there was a lot of conflict, at the second half of the protest. But in the beginning of the protest, there was a different story being told. It was an emerging story of indigenous joy, really. Now that I hear other people talk about this joy of being from a certain place or a certain group of peoples, um, this indigenous joy was happening in the beginning, and it was not being documented. I think that a lot of the perspectives and a lot of the angles that were being shown in the beginning, for in the media, was trying to create this conflict, right, of us versus them. And the reality was that this gathering of more than you know 10,000 people at some point from all different parts of the world, from all indigenous backgrounds. It was something that was joyful, and that it had also a sense of yeah, a sense of thinking beyond just a conflict. So these are some of the images from that time that I was there. So after Standing Rock, and I'm gonna share my screen with something else here. Um, I started really thinking about. So I started seeing a lot of these stories, a lot of these photographers that were being flown in from different places for the weekend to photograph, and it was I started to understanding that whoever gets to tell the story gets to shape the reality that the people will consume. So I started thinking about the fact that a lot of folks, when they think about indigenous peoples, uh, they think about peoples from the past, and then I started thinking why, and then I started, um, looking, for example, at Google, right? When you Google Native American, the first things that you see are mostly images from the past, especially from photographers and storytellers um, that had a very specific perspective, right? And I like to think of it as even as a colonizing perspective of indigenous peoples. Um, so I started looking at this work and started thinking, how can we reimagine and reshape and reprogram people, because it really is what it's a program, right? Like you see these images over and over on media or on movies or on books, and the Indian always loses to the cowboy, right? Or the Indian is the one who kill the cowboys, but you never really understand that these are also human beings, and those human beings are still alive today. The descendants of those people that are portrayed are still alive today, and they're very much part of society. So as I started looking at these images from the past, I started thinking about the voice of the person. You rarely hear from them. You rarely hear their perspective and what they had to say, because the process that was being used during these times was that process of taking and creating a space for them to share their story. So what I decided to do was to create a process that not only allows for the person in the image to have a not even to have a voice, because people already have a voice. When people talk about the voiceless, or give voice to the voiceless, I disagree with that. I think that people already have a voice. It's just that it's up to us as storytellers to see how we want to come into their space and into uplifting that voice, and amplifying that voice. So when I thought about it, I said, well, I'm a photographer, but I think it will be more powerful if the control, I guess you can say, or the tool is given back to the person that is in the image. So instead of me photographing them, it's them photographing themselves. And I decided to do that specifically because I think that we all carry genius in us, and I think that we all can do things that we think sometimes can't do because we've been told we can't do them. So when you tap into that genius and you tap into the mastery of our intuition, then I think that's where a lot of powerful things happen. So that was the process that I was going through, and understanding that my role in this project was not to be the storyteller, but rather to become a facilitator and a collaborator. So through the process of creating this project, the at the forefront of it, I guess you can say, or at the foundation of it, was collaboration. And and there's as I talk about this work, and as I continue to the project, I'm realizing more and more that this work that I'm trying to do and I'm trying to use is intended for healing, and not healing in a way that we are taught about healing, but a lot of it is about self-realization and self-awareness. And it's like going back to that quote about being coherent, and that when you're coherent and given um, you're given another perspective about yourself by yourself. So it's not somebody else telling you who you are, but rather you figuring out and almost like revealing yourself to yourself. And I think that healing, in in addition to the process being collaborative, and also with intention, and I'll be honest, like there was a level of prayer to it, like a ceremony, like a ritual, where we were not making um we were not making something just to make it, but rather to explore, and not even explore, but it was more of you know a it was a journey. It was like, let's go take a journey together. Everything's set up, all the technical stuff is set up, and then once you're ready, we can step into the studio, I guess you can say. But that studio already has been set up in a way that is ritualistic, that is and I think ritualistic, it's a word that sounds a little weird sometimes, but it is a ritual. It is something that um, allows for other things to come in and to really work along with us. So I'm gonna share with you a little bit of this this like behind the scenes of what we do during these sessions. So this is my friend Tekpat. He's a one helping me with the project as my assistant. He's a young photographer who I believe in a lot, and having working with him. Um, this process of creating a studio, space is to also make the person feel comfortable, make the collaborator feel like they are part of the process as well. Um, we put the music that they want to put on. We bring in the food that they want to eat. This is very much like a photo session for the person, and they feel special, they feel cared for, and at the same time, um, they like I said earlier, they open up. And I think that they open up because they see that we are coming with their hands full for them instead of us coming in with the intention of taking something from them. So that has, I think, opened up so many doors within this project because of that, because the intention is to not take, but rather to give. So the person will always pick the image that they choose. So they have a screen in front of them, they'll photograph themselves. Then after we go through the process, we have a conversation back and forth, and we're recording this conversation, and they're aware of that. There's a lot of consent in this project where, they get to say yes or no, and they have the right to say yes or no. Um, and they have the agency to tell me how they want their image to be made. So after they photograph themselves, they pick this image. They're fully are part of the process where they, they see themselves, right? They'll talk out loud about what they like about the images, what they don't like about the images, and most of the time, people open up fairly quickly. I gotta say, I think that, like I said earlier, is that process of them feeling like, hey, all these fancy things, all these fancy photography things that I might not know how to do, is they're set up for me so that I can just get up there and get it done. So we had also, when it comes to the person in the image and who we get to pick, it's, to me, was really important that we were highlighting people that needed to be highlighted in their community because of who they are or what they do. Um, and that's also a big part of it, is that we don't want to amplify, at least in my practice, I don't want to amplify people that might not be good community members, and that's always something that I'm always careful about. So I go through a vetting process with, for example, TechPad, with my assistant and other community members and elders that give me that pointer to, hey, that person is remarkable because of this person is remarkable because of that. And then we make the decision to invite them to the project. So once they're in the project, that means that they have gone through a process of aligning with the intention of what we're trying to do. To me, it's really interesting seeing how, again, when you let people have that agency, the sovereignty to do what they need to do with the image, that you end up with that, that little bit of genius that we all have in us, or a lot of genius actually, and a lot of that comes out. um Let me see. It was really interesting because we traveled through the West Coast. It was Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Portland, and every place we went to, we will go to the community as well, and make sure that we were checking in with them, and checking in with with the folks from that area, with the indigenous peoples from that area, and make sure that they were also okay with us coming in and doing the project. So once again, there was that consultation, that relationship, that we're not just coming in and taking, but we're coming in with something in our hands, and then also just being humble about it, not coming in with entitlement. Another part of this project that is very important is the public art part of it. So originally I wanted these images to go up on walls, and I think there is a process where we will put these images up in walls, big walls, like I'm talking about like 25 feet walls. But I am also learning that with this project, there's a lot of different ways you can go about it. You can put this on walls, you can put this in structures, you can put this in public spaces that are smaller. All those things work, and they also things have a different impact. So for Indigenous Peoples Day last year in Los Angeles, we built these structures that were really big structures, um, and we brought the people in the image to come and help us set up the structures, come and help us put up their image, and at the same time, their community was there. So we did like a surprise honoring where we honor the person, we sing them a song, and then they are given this this recognition within their community. And when you look at it, it's how Indigenous peoples often do things. There's again that ritualistic, that that give me flowers when I'm alive type of thing, where it's not, you're not gonna wait until someone's dead to honor them. You're gonna honor them when they're alive. So it was really good for me to also have the community approve of this project, and be invested in the project, because when the community is invested in your project, then you just never know where it's gonna go, and how it's gonna be, even evolve. Like some of these photos, folks put it on their Instagram, and that was a completely different level of, I guess you can say, of impact than this images on these big walls. So for me, that's always interesting to see how it will evolve, and how the project will also um, become useful, and not only for the person in the image, but um, for the community. And one big part of that, it was that uh, as a collaborator, as a person who's in relationship with these collaborators, there's always things that happen, right? So one of the folks in the image, one of the folks in the project, they had their mother passed away, and they told me, this is one of the things that's keeping me going, is knowing that I'm gonna be having this big photo of myself for my mom to see. And when we put up the image that they were like little girls, like they saw this woman on this big image, and they were little girls taking selfies with this image, and they were young, indigenous girls. And to me, I started seeing again these other impacts and other things that you might not think about that will happen, but they do happen because of, again, the intuition, and not thinking of this process as a rigid thing, but rather as something that is flexible. So here are some of the images from the collaborators. Again, a lot of these folks are not necessarily what you would call like artists or trained artists, but they all they all at first had a hard time drawing on their image, because it was just kind of like, wait, like you don't draw on photographs. But then we know they got comfortable, and then they started just coming out with what they wanted to say. And when we're talking about indigenous representation, and the way that we see indigenous peoples throughout the world, is that indigenous peoples are not only peoples of the past, and we're not only peoples of the present, but we are peoples of the future. And I think that the biggest challenge for me with the work from photographers from the past, or even just more recent photographers that are creating work about indigenous peoples, is that it always keeps indigenous peoples in a past tense or in a present tense that is marginalized. And I disagree with that perspective, because I think that there's so much, um, again, that genius in indigenous communities that are probably going to take us through whatever we're going through right now in that indigenous wisdom, and then it's going to take us to that new paradigm that we're going to be living in the future. And when you make images for the future instead of just for right now or the past, then you're like a couple steps ahead of reprogramming humanity. Because if I see joy and sovereignty and resilience in someone, and I see them as part of the future with intention, then hopefully that might change the perspective that I have of that person. These statements are their legacy statements. So one day when they're no longer here and people want to know who, for example, Joey was, they'll know that, he enjoyed the process in the moment. And we have these recordings, we have this audio that they will be able to tap into and listen to Joey talk. Um, and I think that to me is it's as I figured out how to do this work, it's one of the most important parts is preservation and also amplification. So amplifying the idea that you can make things thinking of the future, and I think there is a big need for us to do that right now, and not to slow down and only because time is really it's really really interesting funny thing, right? So like you know we can tap into the past, present, and future if we really wanted to, but it's just that we have not been allowed, or we haven't allowed ourselves to do that yet. So this is from PhotoBuild. These images that again, the photos when PhotoBuild reached out to me about putting these photos out, it was understanding that the image can live in different spaces, and I really think that for me, that was a big step to to not only think of these images in big buildings, but also in these places where people can see them more on a floor level. I had previously named this presentation "The Future is Indigenous," and I still think that, and I think that comes from reclaiming those stories, um, and also remembering that we're all relatives, that we are all related, that that we are part of a big family on this planet, and when we allow for new ways of telling stories and new ways of sharing our genius, then I really think that's when we will be free.